Hey everybody, welcome to the Vitalyst Spark podcast. I'm your host, John Ford, and we're back, returning from just a little bit of a production hiatus to bring you a slate of new episodes starting today. You know, the point of this podcast is to spark new ways of seeing, thinking about, and improving health and well-being in our communities. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at how a City of Phoenix park is getting ready for a transformation based on doing just that. But aren't parks already healthy, you ask? Of course they are. But what would it look like if a project was conceived at the intersection between healthy foods and parks? It would probably look a lot like the farm at Los Olivos Park. In a nutshell, the farm at Los Olivos will be 1. An urban working farm, 2. A produce stand where visitors can purchase newly harvested fresh and healthy foods, 3. An art and education center focused on food advocacy, food preparation, and more, and 4. Probably the healthiest park concession ever seen, serving unique and delicious foods using the farm's produce for its ingredients. It's a pretty big stretch of an idea, and a pretty bold plan for a pair of Phoenix entrepreneurs. Hey, nowhere else are you going to experience a conversation that blends farming, art, hospitality, Top Gun, and the secret about parsnips in Arizona. You're only going to get that right here, right now, over the next 30 minutes. So let's get to it. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Vitalyst Health Spark podcast. We've got a great conversation going today with two incredibly creative guys. I want to introduce you first to Eric May from, can we say The Parlor?
Absolutely.
And the hospitality industry. What a fabulous restaurant. If you guys haven't had pizza at The Parlor, your life is incomplete.
Or pasta.
I'm all about the pizza. Isn't the world about the pizza? We also have Matt Moore. Matt, 4th generation Arizona farmer, but also artist and creative in your own right, not just out in the fields, but with all kinds of art projects. Welcome to the show as well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having us.
Hey guys, let's just do the short and the sweet. How do you describe if you were to walk up to somebody right now on the street and say, "Hey, I got a project going in Los Olivos Park. Here's what it is." What would you say?
It's a new vision for what a park amenity can be in a dense urban environment that holds food at its core.
When you go to sleep at night, Matt, and you think about this park, what do you see?
Well, we have this amazing opportunity and duty to create this amenity for a park in downtown Phoenix. And we found that we had been on this similar trajectory of looking at our industries, myself and agriculture, art, and advocacy, and Eric coming from a hospitality point, and also thinking about impact and building community, that we were both moving in the same direction, kind of like in Top Gun, where you're kind of like this, right?
Please do not.
Yeah, no,
please leave that on the floor, the Top Gun reference.
Yeah.
Who's Maverick?
Yeah, who's Goose? All right. Anyways, but kind of we were definitely moving in tandem in the same direction. And then once we started to talk about what we wanted to see and why we came back to Phoenix, and really, we both spent over a decade out of Phoenix, and then came back here specifically to around this idea of to have impact and to build the city that we felt that really Phoenix wants to be.
We do have an amazing opportunity and a duty, to create a new vision for what a park amenity can be in a dense urban core that holds food at its center. And there's multiple ways that you can access that through farm-to-table concessions, through education opportunities, and also through walking and experiencing a real working piece of agriculture, a real farm in the middle of the city.
Amen.
I am hungry already.
We couldn't be more excited, and really it was humbling to see the amount of community support that's rallied around this very simple idea. Also I think it's important to just talk about the fact that the Parks and Recreation Department has a core mission statement, and that's to build healthy communities. This falls perfectly in line, we feel, with that mission statement. And what's beautiful about it is that it embraces the other piece of what builds healthy communities, which is our diet and our food system, which, kind of up to this point, Parks Department's never really waded into those waters before. They've really just been focused on the health and the wellness of the community's health and wellness. So we're really excited to to have the food culture, the nutrition, those things be embraced in a park setting. Super exciting.
So there's still a couple of steps though. So yes, same vision. I love the point about, we want to make Phoenix the city it needs to be, that it wants to be. But how does that get a guy who runs a restaurant and a guy who does farming and digital art, how does that get you guys out of your individual silos and into a partnership to do something completely different from what either one of you have done before?
Well, I think some of that comes from, we're both on a high level pretty creative, and have both come from a different arts. Eric is more music and, well, even design and art related as well. But there is this sense of when you're an artist, take any of these industries. We're kind of, you picked like the 3 worst industries to go make money in. Art, farming, and hospitality. You can't. And so, there is this sort of, you have to overcome adversity. In farming, I grew up just with the idea that every day is a challenge. And then going into an art career that, really that we're in essence problem solvers, and that you have to be resilient in the face of a community that may not support as art as much as you would like. And how do you build a career, and how do you just say, I'm going to do this? And even though in the face of that adversity, you get up every morning and plant the seed, you get up every morning and make the artwork, you get up every morning and serve the people. Those things are challenges that every day you don't want to do that. And you get beat up. But we're made of generational ilk that demands us to basically rise to the occasion and look to the future and build legacy.
And Eric, Matt just mentioned, the legacy you want to build. What legacy will be built at Los Olivos Park with this project?
It's a great question. I think what we want to create is an experience that is so compelling that it leaves a mark on people, and it makes people think a little bit more, or maybe a lot more, about where the food comes from, what it takes to grow it, and that will hopefully have ripple effects that are unknown to us today. But it really just comes down to this simple idea of creating a magical and compelling experience that fits into a larger park experience.
So to some extent, I'm having this experience myself in my backyard, and it's like that tomato that took, I don't even know how many days, 120 days to grow, and the bird just ate. So how will people interact at Los Olivos and see that experience of what it takes to go from seed to produce, and then from produce to table? What's that going to look like? What is your vision for that?
I think that you touch on a really important point in terms of what's ingrained into us as humans. And a lot of times, especially in this new digital age, and that we're all more connected in some sense, but disconnected in these other carnal senses. And those represent themselves throughout how we build community, how people come together in a physical sense. And the great thing about agriculture, it is a thing that really represents to us it's something that we all connect to. And that's also in the same way at the table. And over the course of why it's so important to have it in a park and have it as this regional accessible thing where people can have this experience during park hours and walk through a farm, is because it's different than what we experience on a day-to-day level. When you see the life cycle of crops from seed to harvest, and you can walk around and you can see things growing and things dying, and the evolution that things actually grow here in the desert and are vibrant, and that it gives you a sense of place, which allows us to inform how we conduct ourselves in that place in a more well-rounded and focused way, I believe. And I think that integrating that type of continually evolving environment that people can walk through on a day-to-day basis is immeasurable how powerful that might be for kids to seniors. and how can we create a space that really is an open invitation on that scale. And at that location, Parks is a perfect place for it. And to me, that's the thing that's so exciting and really a revolution in terms of what we're offering in this desert city at this moment in time. We had 4 community meetings. Most of them were 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. We had, over the course of 4 months, about 1,200 individual, unique people come through those community meetings. And over the course of that time, we were able to ask the community what they wanted. And at the end of it, I mean, we aggregated 84% of supporters to this idea, that everybody was so excited about it. And their range of what they wanted was not as wide as you would imagine. I mean, but there was this great focus on basically wanting to have access to things that are growing and volunteer to do that, or to learn how to cook and learn about nutrition. They were really but the community at large was so hungry for that. Was again, like Eric said, it was totally humbling.
Yeah, and the community outreach process too was sort of a great litmus test. It was a good stress test on the idea, because Matt and I, we are investing personally in this. We're going to give this thing everything we've got. And if we went through this period of community outreach and we really determined that the community didn't want this, that would have been a great moment and point for us to say, okay, great. It's a great idea. Maybe it belongs somewhere else. But what we found is exactly the opposite. We found a passionate and meaningful, level of response from the community. I mean, really, that came out in support.
Let's flip the coin from the supporters to the detractors.
Yeah.
What would you say to the folks who didn't want it in the first place at this point?
I think I could speak to that first. I mean, there was a lot of the information that was getting out there when we first started the process and were selected. We were working with the Parks Board to understand what community outreach was, and just trying to make sure that we were doing it correctly and per the book, because it's very specific when these RFPs that if you err even on a signature, you can blow up your entire application.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very specific and well thought through process, obviously, because this is how the city makes sure that everything is fair and up above board, and that they can stand behind the results. So during that process, though, there was maybe like a month downturn, and then we came to one of our first meetings with the senior center, and there was already somehow a thread on that there was going to be apartments built over even that they were going to blade the senior center, and they being us, I guess, and all this misinformation.
Enormous amounts of misinformation that just started spreading like wildfire.
So the first thing that we really had to do, and I think that's what we recognize still, is that the amount of misinformation around this idea, that we are not developing this for multifamily, that there is a lot of things happening in development in general in Phoenix that have people concerned. And then we became the sounding board because we had such an open community process and our hours were so long, and then that we drug it out and made sure that the community wanted it. Because for us, as Eric said, I mean, people didn't want it, it wouldn't work for us anyways. So, right. Well, you don't want to, and so I think that
the community has to own this if it's going to work.
Yeah.
And so some of those, most of the stuff was really around, you're going to don't blade all the trees, and we're not. We're planting more trees, and we're working with the Parks Department about what's the next 40 years look like, what kind of trees. There's a lot of olive trees. This is a historic agricultural site. It has water rights to boot because of that agricultural history. It's a great site for it. It has this adjacency with the senior center, so there's programming that the city is always constantly moving that we can really partner with. It's a wonderful amenity for that park, and it's really going to help improve and get more access into that park. For us, really it's about a regional park. It's truly a regional park. That's the only thing that we're on the table to look at from the RFP perspective. So what we're talking about is making a park more active for everyone.
Can I just add something to what Matt said? So we had a lot of misinformation to overcome. And I think that when we were able to do that through all the various means and methods, we were able to really win the hearts and the minds of the majority of the neighborhoods. As we're talking about, to your question, the people that just wouldn't get on board, I do think it's important to note this. The staunchest opposers, Joda and Bart and Catherine and some of these people that we've gotten to know very well through this process, all of them at some point or another in the course of our conversations said this: it's actually a great idea, we just want it somewhere else.
Got it.
Literally 100% of the staunchest opposers said some version of that phrase.
Because our park, we like it the way it is?
Exactly.
Okay.
If you look at the idea itself as it just sits on paper, and you can sort of detach it from the emotional attachment that people might have to their park, the idea is met with about 100% support. Really. I didn't meet anybody through this process that just flat out said the idea sucks.
All right. So now we know we got a great idea.
So then you just have to look at the split between how many people think Los Olivos is the right park and how many people don't. And it's in the neighborhood of 90% of the people think the Los Olivos is the right park. So, but
I'm actually not okay with it because it's too far from my house.
Which we heard. So the last piece to your question was, what would we say to the people that just still are not on board with this? And I think it's just really important to note that this is an idea. It's a vision born out of service. I think there is some misconception that we're trying to take. We're trying to, to blade and to own and to develop and to consume this piece of their park. But what I think that some of them have missed is that we're trying to set up a beautiful space and serve the people that come to this park as opposed to take from. And I think that's an important thing to leave those people with.
Hey, it's always tough stepping forward and trying to, as you said earlier, make Phoenix the city it wants to be, because a lot of people don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you guys for making those steps, for being those people who step forward, for being the leaders. There's no doubt there'll be more mess between now and the future, but it'll be worth it. So what is the timeline? We've got approval from the Parks and Rec Department. What are the major phases of development, and when do they happen according to today's timeline?
So we have to formalize our agreement with the city. We've been given legal authority by the Parks Board to do that. So that's going to take a couple months. And then once we have our deal official, it's inked, it's done. That's going to kick off, I'd say, about a two-year timeline. We've got design, we've got permitting, and then we've got construction. We're definitely going to take our time with design because we only get one shot to do this, and we want this place to be world-class in every respect. So the design phase, we're going to give it the time that it needs. But once we stick a shovel in the ground, it's going to be pedal to the metal. So we can get through that construction phase as quickly as possible.
So sometime in 2020?
Yeah.
Matt, how's the soil?
Well,
you said it's historically an agricultural site.
Well, it's a good thing is that we're not having to mitigate any sort of,
no brownfield scenarios.
No brownfields or old, change your oil places or anything like that.
There's a legacy and a lineage on this soil that we can trace all the way back to it just being raw desert.
Yeah.
There's no skeletons in the closet there.
Nice.
And the great thing about this soil, this traditionally sandy loam area is that it's a really good base to grow a lot of amazing crops, and so
I think I went to high school with Sandy Loam.
Yeah, Sandy Loam.
Oh,
There's a lot of jokes.
Sandy Loam. Okay.
Yeah. But the soil is, there's this guy. His name is Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry.
Absolutely.
He's amazing, and I've followed him for years, and he had this. It's really at the base of this intention of like you have to ask the ground what it wants to do, right? And really. Not to beat down parks, or I just don't think Bermuda's it. And I think that there's a huge opportunity to improve that soil. And but it is also one of the biggest battles that we have is the Bermuda. And but again, my family's been farming since the early 20s here, and we've overcome a lot of things in those generations. And there's this amazing amount of resource that has come together around this idea.
The phrase "it takes a village" has never been more applicable.
Because you know why? Bermuda does not give up.
That's right.
Bermuda does not give up easily. Neither do neighbors, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Well, neighbors aren't going to give up. Neighbors are going to be part of it, right? So, lightning round question. I'm going to ask you to be as succinct as possible and complete the following phrase. 3 years from now, neighbors in the community will say, oh, that Los Olivos farm at the park is...
Perfect.
The most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Nice.
Working.
Nice. Working.
Yeah.
Growing. Feeding.
Yeah. There is also another...
Teaching.
I wanted to... There's another part of that to your our basically going to build is that what we discovered is this amazing amount of want to be interactive with this on a philanthropic level. And we built the model so that it could sustain itself privately, and that's what the whole idea was, is that we have to be able to have this social impact business and have it be resilient. What we thought was out there but didn't want to bank on was this idea of people really wanted to donate their time, donate their money, donate their ideas to this project, and it's an overwhelming amount of people that are coming to the table with that. And so Greenbelt will have a nonprofit side that basically is the vessel for this education platform that we realize is going to be a lot bigger than the site itself. And that's what's so exciting and emblematic of it as we think about what is Phoenix going to be as a city, that this idea is much bigger than the site itself.
So
and how we're looking forward to the
So
future.
it's not just a public-private as in Greenbelt and the city, it's kind of public-public-private?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at the classic analogy of the three-legged stool, obviously the city is one of those legs because they are the landowner. Greenbelt is one of those legs because we come in with the finance and the expertise. But then there is this really interesting third leg that seems to be forming, which would be a philanthropic injection into the idea, which could take this thing that we think we can make it, amazing and just push it even farther than we even could have dreamed.
Going out 5 years from now, you've now been in operation for 2.5, 3 years. What do you think might surprise you most, and what do you think might disappoint you most?
I think that what will disappoint us most is that there's not enough time in the day to serve as many people as we want. And I think that from an education side, from an advocacy side, and from a straight up hospitality side.
Most surprising, most disappointing?
Well, I think most surprising might just be how hungry this community and this city really is for this idea.
You guys keep using hungry, by the way, related to food. Our financial engine, the engine that's going to keep this thing moving forward without tax dollars and without philanthropic dollars doesn't need it. We've developed it's pretty modest, and we're very interested to see, and it might be surprising that we could completely overshoot those sort of modest projections. That would be amazing. Disappointing, I would say, if other places in the world don't really stand up and look and take notice and say, hey,
we should embrace this and we should try to do this in our city, that would be disappointing.
I think the most surprising thing would be is if you come up with a dish that makes turnips taste good.
Oh, come on. Turnips are awesome.
Turnip greens. Besides bacon, you can't use bacon just as like that thing.
Matt, do you know? Did you know this? Matt's like the parsnip guy.
I didn't know
most
that.
people don't know that.
Hey, whoa.
Mr. Parsnip.
Don't put this on them. It's my thing.
Matt.
We've got some.
Matt's an entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word, and you figured out a kind of an off-shoulder season to grow parsnips here. Is that what you figured out?
Yeah.
And
I'm not talking anymore.
Don't talk about it.
No. No, the parsnips.
First rule of parsnips: don't talk about parsnips.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's a shame you guys don't have any entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Well, you talked about it earlier about how did we come together, and I think we're both born of a creative cloth, and we both actually are more comfortable pushing the envelope and being inventive, and because of that, I think it was pretty easy and natural for us to meet and to come together and say, hey, let's dream up this new thing.
Yeah, we never said you can't do that.
Yeah,
we're not.
Oh, that's outside of my lane. I mean,
Yeah.
we're more comfortable kind of creating new lanes, if you will. I mean, that's kind of where I like to operate. That's what keeps things interesting.
So in creating those new lanes, that's a big part of what we're thinking about as a foundation as well. What advice would you give to people about creating those new lanes? Because remember, we're all trying to wrap our heads around the idea that health is more than healthcare, that it's actually pretty much everywhere else, and that personal responsibility plays a role, but so does the environment all around us, the infrastructure, the things that we have access to. How do you get people to step out of their lanes? How do you encourage that?
I think that one of the most important things that we can do as a community right now is embrace moments and get behind ideas that inspire hope. And in the zeitgeist of what's happening now in the world, I mean, we're so desperate for that, and that's fertilizer for us as humans. And for me, that's what I would really want people to look for, is that it's so easy to stand tall to adversity when there's hope.
I think, as entrepreneurs, one of the things you have to focus on is like a value creation, because that's what creates, a business that has a viable economic engine. You're going to create value in some space. People are going to see that value and they're going to flock to it in some way, shape, or form. When we're talking about the social practice, I think it can sort of easily, go down that path of, nonprofits, things that need endowments, things that need government funding, those kinds of things. So I would encourage people that have that desire to create a social practice that will do good, that will be good and create good, to try to dream up a way in which you can also create economic and financial value while you're at it. Because if those two things don't have a connection, then you're beholden to the donors, you're beholden to, the 2019 budgets, and sometimes those things can get ripped out from under you, and all the work and all the passion that you have for whatever that idea is can just get stopped. So I think it's so important to understand that there has to be a fiscal and an economic piece to it that is also a part of that value creation.
And it's worth noting right here and right now that this will be the one park in the city of Phoenix that will have programming that can't be cut due to a budget shortfall.
Thank you. I appreciate you making that statement, and we have done our best to try to get that message out. But that's a real thing. These programs and these education pieces can exist, regardless of where the city is from a budgetary standpoint.
We are so grateful to Matt and Eric for giving us their time for this conversation. You can learn a lot more about the farm at Los Olivos by visiting the project's website at losolivospark.com. That's olivospark.com. Want to hear more interviews like this? All you've got to do is help us make the most of this independent media effort by sharing our podcast with colleagues, family, and friends. We need dialogue about health and well-being throughout our community, but dialogue doesn't happen unless we get these topics out into the light of day and then work together to discover the healthier Arizona that we all want to see. Thank you for being our listeners. Don't forget, check your podcast app for our previous episodes, or visit vitalysthealth.org to access them from your computer. Let's keep the conversation growing. Subscribe to the Vitalyst Spark podcast to get notified as soon as new episodes are released, and encourage others to come along for the ride with you. In the world of podcasts, your rating matters a lot, so take a moment to give us 5 stars on iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also give us your input the old-fashioned way. Email your future episode ideas, mini-sode content suggestions, and more. Your corrections, complaints, and compliments are all welcomed by emailing us at feedback@vitalysthealth.org. Finally, remember this: with great responsibility comes great power. We'll see you back on the road to well-being soon.